A Battle of Midway, the turning point of the Pacific War, June 4 to 7th, 1942. Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to explore one of the most decisive naval battles in history, the Battle of Midway, fought in June 1942. This engagement fundamentally changed the course of World War II in the Pacific and demonstrated how intelligence, courage, and sometimes sheer luck can determine the fate of nations. Setting the stage, the Pacific after Pearl Harbor. 6 months before Midway, on December 7th, 1941, Japan had shocked the world with its attack on Pearl Harbor. In the months that followed, the Japanese seemed unstoppable. They conquered the Philippines, Malaya, Singapore, the Dutch East Indies, and pushed deep into the Pacific. By spring 1942, the Japanese Empire was at its zenith, controlling a vast territory from the borders of India to the Central Pacific. Admiral Yamamoto, commander of the Japanese Combined Fleet, believed that Japan needed to extend its defensive perimeter and eliminate the American carrier threat. Despite the success at Pearl Harbor, the U.S. Pacific Fleet's carriers had been at sea that day and remained a dangerous force. Yamamoto decided that the small American base at Midway Atoll, a tiny speck of coral, roughly 1,300 miles northwest of Hawaii, would be his target. The Japanese plan. Yamamoto's plan was ambitious and complex. He would lure the remaining American carriers into a trap by attacking Midway. The Americans would rush to defend the atoll, and the superior Japanese fleet would destroy them. To support this operation, Japan assembled the most powerful naval force ever seen in the Pacific. 4 large fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, supported by battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and invasion transports, carrying 5,000 troops. The Japanese were supremely confident. Their carriers had veteran pilots who had honed their skills in China and at Pearl Harbor. Their planners believed the Americans had only 2 carriers available, when in fact they had 3, and more importantly, the Japanese didn't know that the Americans had broken their naval codes. American intelligence, the critical advantage. This is where Commander Joseph Rochefort and his team at Station HYPO in Pearl Harbor enter our story. Working around the clock in the basement of the 14th Naval District Headquarters, Rochefort's cryptanalysts had been painstakingly breaking Japanese naval codes. By late May 1942, they had intercepted and partially decrypted messages indicating a major operation against a target designated AF. Rochefort believed AF was Midway, but he needed proof. In a brilliant piece of deception, he had Midway send a fake message in plain language reporting that their cabin water distillation plant had broken down. Days later, Japanese intelligence reported that AF was short of fresh water. The trap was confirmed. The Japanese were coming to Midway. Admiral Chester Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet, now knew where and approximately when the Japanese would strike. He positioned his 3 available carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, northeast of Midway, ready to ambush the ambushers. Yorktown had been damaged at the Battle of the Coral Sea just a month earlier, but in a remarkable feat of round-the-clock repairs at Pearl Harbor, she was made seaworthy in just 72 hours. The battle begins, June 4th, 1942. At dawn on June 4th, Japanese aircraft launched from their carriers to attack Midway's installations. American patrol planes had spotted the Japanese fleet, and Midway's defenders scrambled every available aircraft to strike back. But the initial American attacks were disastrous. Torpedo bombers from Midway, flying obsolete aircraft, attacked bravely but were cut down by Japanese fighters with almost no losses to the enemy. Meanwhile, the American carriers launched their own strikes. The timing would prove crucial. Japanese Admiral Chuichi Nagumo, commanding the carrier strike force, faced a dilemma. His planes were returning from Midway, meeting to land, but reports of American ships to the northeast required a strike force armed with torpedoes instead of land attack bombs. As his crews frantically rearmed aircraft on the carry-off hangar decks, American torpedo squadrons arrived. The sacrifice of Torpedo Squadron 8. What happened next was one of the most heroic and tragic episodes of the battle. 3 torpedo squadrons from the American carriers attacked the Japanese fleet at low level without fighter protection. Torpedo Squadron 8 from the Hornet, led by Lieutenant Commander John Waldron, was slaughtered. Of 15 aircraft, all were shot down. Only one man, Ensign George Gay, survived, floating in the ocean and witnessing what came next. The other torpedo squadrons suffered similar fates. Of 41 torpedo bombers that attacked that morning, 35 were shot down without scoring a single hit. It appeared to be a complete disaster. But these brave men had drawn the Japanese combat air patrol down to sea level and scattered the fleet's protective formation, setting the stage for what followed. 5 minutes that changed history. At 10:22 a.m., dive bombers from Enterprise in Yorktown, led by Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey and Lieutenant Commander Maxwell Leslie, arrived over the Japanese fleet at 14,000 feet. The sky was clear of enemy fighters. They were all at low altitude, dealing with the torpedo bombers. The Japanese carriers' decks were crowded with fully fueled, fully armed aircraft. McCluskey pushed over into his dive, followed by his squadron. In approximately 5 minutes, 3 Japanese fleet carriers, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, were transformed into floating infernos. Bombs penetrated their decks and detonated among the armed and fueled aircraft below. Secondary explosions tore through the ships. Japan's naval aviation striking power was being destroyed in minutes. The counterattack and Yorktown's fate. 1 Japanese carrier remained, Hiryu. Her aircraft struck back, finding and heavily damaging Yorktown. The American carrier absorbed multiple bomb and torpedo hits but remained afloat thanks to excellent damage control. However, later that afternoon, a second wave from Hiryu delivered the fatal blows. Yorktown was abandoned, though she would not sink for 2 more days. But American dive bombers found Hiryu that afternoon. Like her sisters, she was hit multiple times and set ablaze. By evening of June 4th, all 4 Japanese fleet carriers were knocked out of action. 3 would sink that night, and Hiryu the next morning after her crew scuttled her. The aftermath. Admiral Yamamoto, receiving reports of the disaster, briefly considered pressing on with his battleships to engage the Americans in a night surface action, but wisely chose to withdraw. The Americans had won a stunning victory. The numbers tell the story. Japan lost 4 fleet carriers, a heavy cruiser, 248 aircraft, and approximately 3,000 men, including many of their most experienced pilots. The Americans lost Yorktown, the destroyer Hammond, 145 aircraft, and 307 men. Historical significance. The Battle of Midway was the turning point of the Pacific War. Before Midway, Japan was advancing. After Midway, Japan was retreating. The strategic initiative passed permanently to the United States. Japan's carrier aviation would never fully recover from the loss of ships, aircraft, and irreplaceable veteran pilots. Midway demonstrated that intelligence wins battles. Rochefort's team gave Nimitz the priceless advantage of knowing the enemy's plans. It showed that courage matters. Those torpedo bomber crews who press home hopeless attacks against overwhelming odds made the dive bomber's success possible. And it revealed that in war, fortunes can reverse in minutes. For the United States, Midway provided hope and proof that Japan could be defeated. For Japan, it was the beginning of a long, grinding defensive war that would end 3 years later with surrender. Conclusion. The Battle of Midway reminds us that history pivots on moments of decision, sacrifice, and sometimes fortune. In those crucial 5 minutes on the morning of June 4th, 1942, the course of World War II in the Pacific was fundamentally altered. The men who fought there, on both sides, displayed remarkable bravery. We study this battle not just to understand naval tactics or military history, but to appreciate how individuals working with skill, intelligence, and courage can change the course of history. Thanks for listening to the end.